Good evening, everyone. My name is Dundrup. I am the SPC here at Tupten Norbuling, and regrettably, I'm unable to be with you all this evening. There's a Guru Puja at the center, and that is where I am at the moment. But I did want to make sure that I welcomed Venerable Yönten back to our virtual Gompa. It has been far too long since we've been able to have Venerable Yönten offering teachings to our students. Venerable took ordination back in 2003 and has been the resident teacher of a number of different centers over the years. And more recently, you can find her at Maitripa. For a long time, it was more difficult to find her teachings in the United States. She was often teaching abroad, but we now have the good fortune of her return to the United States, and so I very much hope that this is the beginning of a deeper connection between the center and Venerable Yönten. For many people within FPMT, she is one of their very favorite teachers, and I certainly share that view. So I can say that you guys are in extremely capable hands, and you're in for a real treat for this module. So I wanted to again thank Venerable Yönten for accepting our invitation and extend, again, my sincere wish that this is the beginning of a closer period of collaboration between Tupten Norbuling and Venerable Yönten. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone enjoys this module that she will be teaching. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Is it Zella? Am I saying that right?
It's Shayla. I go by Shayla. Anything
Shayla.
works.
Shayla, thank you so much. And thank you, Venerable Dundrup. I understand wearing many hats simultaneously, so please send him my regards when you see Venerable Dundrup. So I thought we would start with just normal refuge and bodhichitta. Some of this is very familiar to a few of you, and then a few of you might not be used to this prayer. So if it's not comfortable, just take a minute and connect with a sense of altruism and a sense of this practice and this class being more than today, more than yourself. So however it feels comfortable to connect in your heart, we'll go ahead and do the traditional prayer. Sangye churon zoge chunam la janchu padudani kapsuji dagi chunyen gi pesonam gi rola penche sangye drupa sho sangye churon zoge chunam la janchu padudani kapsuji dagi chunyen gi pesonam gi Rola pinche sange drupa sho sange churon sogi chunam la janchu badu dani kapsuchi dagi chunyen gi pe sonam gi rola pinche sange drupa sho. And just let that motivation connect for a moment. Okay. So we're going to do Discovering Buddhism, Presenting the Path. It's module number 3. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have been doing Discovering Buddhism already? Just a little wave, show of hands. A few of you? Looks like all of you. Wow, almost all of you. That's amazing. It's fantastic curriculum, so I'm really glad that there's some people engaging with it. So this module 3, this is really talking about the key things on the path to really get very clear on. You're probably already finding in Buddhism that there is so many lists and so many details and so many tools and methodologies that it's easy to get a bit overwhelmed. And then when you're overwhelmed, you can get kind of stuck or a little bit stagnant or a bit paralyzed with what to do first. And this particular module, I think, is very helpful in clarifying the three main things. The three main things in Mahayana Buddhism that you really want to become quite clear on. And when you're quite clear on these three, then you can really find connections between all of the other topics within Buddhism quite easily and see how they're all reinforcing one or all of these three. So the three are renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view. So these are called the three principal aspects of the path. And the three principal aspects of the path from the perspective of people who are Mahayana practitioners. So these might not be the three main things that are kind of drilled down into in every single type of Buddhism. But for those of us in the Sanskrit tradition, those of us in Mahayana Buddhism, these are really the key things to understand. So renunciation, bodhicitta, correct view, three things. And there's a very popular prayer that has been written by Lama Tsongkhapa, who is the founder of our tradition in the 14th century. And he wrote a poem called The Three Principal Aspects of the Path, which really explain what they're about. So I thought what we would do is go ahead and just read the three principal aspects of the path prayer together to get ourselves kind of grounded. And for those of you that are already familiar, getting it refreshed. And then we would do very brief visualization meditation using Shakyamuni Buddha to just kind of get us into the flow with this particular topic. Okay, so we'll start by just kind of getting ourselves that contemplative posture of a straight back. And just kind of let yourself enter into a really reflective, curious space. And as I read the three principal aspects of the path prayer by Lama Tsongkhapa, if it feels like you'll engage better, recite along with me. And if it feels like you'd rather listen, just listen very deeply and see what resonates. All right. Homage to the precious noble masters. The very essence of all the Buddhist teachings, the path that is praised by the noble bodhisattvas, the entrance for all fortunate ones desiring liberation, to the best of my ability I shall now set forth. You who are unattached to samsara's pleasures, and strive to make full use of the freedoms and advantages. You who follow the path delighting all the Buddhas, fortunate ones, listen well with a clear and open mind. Whilst lacking pure renunciation, there is no way to pacify the continual thirst for pleasure in the ocean of samsara. And since all living beings are bound by their craving for existence, you must begin by finding the determination to be free. Freedoms and advantages are rare, and there's no time to waste. Reflect on this again and yet again, and dispel attachment to this life. To dispel attachment to your future lives, contemplate repeatedly the unfailing effects of karma and the sufferings of samsara. When, through growing accustomed to thinking in this way, hope for the pleasures of samsara no longer arises even for an instant, and throughout both day and night you long for liberation, then at that time true renunciation has been born. Yet if this renunciation is not embraced by the pure motivation of bodhicitta, it will not become a cause for the perfect bliss of unsurpassed awakening. So the wise should generate the supreme bodhicitta. Beings are swept along by the powerful current of the four rivers, tightly bound by the chains of karma so difficult to undo, ensnared within the iron trap of their self-grasping, and enshrouded in the thick darkness of ignorance. Again and yet again they are reborn in limitless samsara, and constantly tormented by the three forms of suffering. This is the current condition of all your mothers from previous lives. Contemplate their plight and generate supreme bodhicitta. If you lack the wisdom that realizes the nature of things, although you might grow accustomed to renunciation and bodhicitta, you will be incapable of cutting through conditioned existence at its root. Exert yourself, therefore, in the methods for realizing interdependence. the one who sees that cause and effect operate infallibly for all the phenomena of samsara and nirvana, and for whom any objects of conceptual focus have subsided, has set out upon the path delighting all the Buddhas. The knowledge that appearances arise unfailingly in dependence, and the knowledge that they are empty and beyond all assertions. As long as these two appear to you as separate, there can be no realization of the Buddha's wisdom. Yet when they arise at once, not each in turn but both together, then through merely seeing unfailing dependent origination, certainty is born, and all modes of misapprehension fall apart. That is when discernment of the view has reached perfection. When you know that appearances dispel the extreme of existence, while the extreme of nothingness is eliminated by emptiness, and you also come to know how emptiness arises as cause and effect, then you will be immune to any view entailing clinging to extremes. When in this way you have correctly understood the key points of the three principal aspects of the path, withdraw to solitude, dear son, strengthen your diligence, and quickly accomplish the ultimate and lasting aim. And so some of that will have been clear, and some of that will have been unclear. And for now, just imagine that whatever strikes you as immediately relevant related to renunciation, bodhichitta, and correct view really takes root in your heart, and that you're supported by it, by Shakyamuni Buddha himself. And so visualize that Shakyamuni Buddha appears in the space in front of you, golden in color, one face, two arms, sitting in the Vajra lotus position, smiling and looking directly at you, while simultaneously holding all sentient beings. Three-dimensional, real, made of transparent light. And then visualize that from the heart center of Shakyamuni Buddha comes a stream of radiant golden light that curves in an arc, goes to the crown of your head, and flows through you and fills you up. Blessings and realizations of the path. And then holding that visualization of golden light, bringing blessings and realizations of the path, add the mantra. Taya taya om mune mune maha munae so taya ta om mune mune maha munae so Jaya ta om mune mune maha munae so. And continue that mantra under your breath, together with the visualization. Jaya ta om muni muni maha munae so ha. Tayata Om Muni Muni Maha Muni So. And think that Shakyamuni Buddha then dissolves into light and absorbs into you, blessing your body, speech, and mind. Okay. So, the three principal aspects of the path. Just so I kind of get a sense of this group and the sense of all of you, I wondered if you'd feel comfortable sharing what your impression is of these so far. So it's not like a pop quiz, it's just kind of a getting to know you. Does anyone feel comfortable explaining what they understand renunciation to be so far in your study? What is renunciation? Any brave ones? Yeah, Thomas, go ahead.
So my
Oh,
understanding
sorry.
is to become dissatisfied with samsara, to be kind of fed up with the whole thing and ready to make the commitment to strive for a proper understanding, to strive for enlightenment, so that we can finish up with the cycle of samsara.
Yeah, well put. Yep, very much so. Yeah. Cynthia, would you add anything to that, or Eleanor? Thank you for that, Thomas.
Oh, similar, that we wanna let go of our afflictions and try and create merit through renunciation and purification.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah, Eleanor, would you add anything to that? Renunciation? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, love.
Buddha.
Perfect.
Thank you. It's a way of life, that sees things in a differently. No pleasures. The pleasures of this world are so, they're not worth hanging on to, really. They don't last, and it's the impermanence of all of that, and yearning for a finish to samsara, really. Enlightenment, life after life.
Yeah,
Working at it. Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, I love that you said it's a way of life. I think that when we talk about renunciation, there's a lot that we understand from the word itself, and then we realize that the word itself has been translated as renunciation quite a long time ago by perhaps scholars who weren't necessarily practitioners, and that sort of more current translators who have also been practitioners might sort of call it the determination to be free, or the intention of definite emergence is one. And sometimes that gives a better sense of it, and sometimes it makes it more convoluted. So whether you like the old word for it or the new words for it, renunciation or the determination to be free, we really want to ask ourselves, what are we giving up specifically, and for what reason, to what end, right? So we're not giving up pleasure, but we're changing our relationship to it. We're fundamentally changing our relationship to pleasure. Yeah. We are seeking disillusionment, but not disillusionment with life itself, disillusionment for samsaric life. Yeah. So what we're really renouncing is suffering and the causes of suffering. And what we don't realize is that one of the causes for suffering is the way we relate to pleasure. Yeah. It's not the pleasure itself, it's how we relate to pleasure. And so we want to kind of break the spell of our sensory experiences being our main source of entertainment, comfort, pleasure, relief, etc. We're used to using the senses to become satisfied. And it turns out that we're never fully satisfied. And that should be quite useful information to come across that maybe will make us curious about the spiritual path. What it winds up doing often for people that haven't met a spiritual path is that their disillusionment with the temporariness of pleasures makes them depressed, or more hedonistic, or full of kind of victimization mentality, or any number of stories that make you locked in disempowerment. Yeah, fundamental disempowerment, because you've given the outside world all of the power to give or take your happiness. So more renunciation means more happiness, because you've changed your relationship to where happiness and pleasure come from. Yeah, you've taken the power back from objects. So renunciation is a key one to really get our heads around, because we want to break the root of samsara. One of the methods is wisdom, which we'll talk about later, but one of the methods is a true disillusionment together with a healthy type of hope. Yeah, so you're disillusioned with the patterns that your mind has been doing from beginningless time until now. And also you have great hope that your mind is trainable. And you even remember that there have been times where you have been completely content, or at least more content than usual. And it wasn't about the sensory experience, it was about your own mentality. So you're remembering that you've already done that for yourself in the past. You can do it more and deeper and consistently. So renunciation, you're renouncing suffering and the causes of suffering. So the ways to get rid of suffering and the causes of suffering involve a lot of thought, meditation, journaling, conversation on the first two noble truths. Yeah, the truth of suffering and the truth of origin. Yeah, but you don't want to just stay with the first two noble truths, or you'll be sad. Right? You remember there's two whole other noble truths, right? Cessation and path. Suffering can be ended. There is a method for that. That is very empowering. So renunciation is very good news, but it sounds like you're being deprived of fun. So really coming to understand the word is very essential to this whole process. So we'll come back to renunciation, because of course this whole course is about these three. So more on that. I really appreciate what you guys shared. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. And we will have a photo bomber of any number of cats. So just, I beg your pardon in advance, cat photo bombers. She's taken my mala. No. Okay, so the second one, bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. What is bodhicitta in your understanding so far? What are the words that you associate with bodhicitta? Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a perfect definition, just kind of even associations. Bodhicitta, this word makes me think of what?
Joy, happiness, love. Those are the words that I think of.
Joy, happiness, love. Nice. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, what else? Yeah, Susan, go ahead.
Think about interconnection. So it's not just about relieving my suffering, but everyone's suffering, because we're all interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
And
a widening of focus. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, what are other people bring to mind? T, did you have one?
Oh, yes. Just bodhicitta for me is just sitting with the whole and heart. So it's just everyone, all sentient beings, sitting and just with everyone in heart
Yeah.
for the true intentions of us being all liberated from
Yeah.
suffering.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. I get like a visceral feeling of heart when you say that. That's beautiful. Yeah. And like not physical heart, but like heart center. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, what other bits and pieces come up when you hear this word bodhicitta, or even just questions that you have? Anyone else?
But
Yeah, go ahead, Cynthia.
Um, I'm thinking aspiring to achieve uh Buddhahood so that we can help others is what comes to my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly that. Yeah, definitely that. Yeah, well said. Yep. Yeah, yeah, Eleanor.
I was thinking that it starts with the self first. You know, if we don't love ourselves and we don't practice the path, then we can't possibly be of any use to anybody else, or limited use. You know, in the sense of yeah,
Yeah,
especially yeah.
yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jai, go ahead.
Uh, everything that everyone else has said, and in addition, the thing that sustains me is thinking that, in fact, I am everybody's mother.
Mm,
They're
yeah.
all my children. And that way, no matter what they're doing, I can be very forgiving toward them and open-hearted.
Mm.
So that helps me with my bodhicitta.
Yeah, and that's tying into one of those key methods, isn't it? One of the key methods for developing bodhicitta, that recognition of the mother relationship that we've all been in with one another countless times. And it's an interesting tool and it can be really effective. Absolutely. So yes, we'll circle back to that one as well. That's beautiful. So then the third one is perhaps the easiest to say, the hardest to understand. I don't know. What is the correct view? What is the correct view in the three principal aspects of the path? Yeah, Jennifer. Oh, you're still muted.
Yeah, I don't understand it well at all, but what I do understand is that everything is a conception forced upon me by karma.
Yeah.
And I'm on that right now, that I'm responsible for my karma. That's what I'm working on at this time.
Yeah, there's some keywords in there that go in that category for sure. For sure. Yeah, it's moving in the right direction. The correct view is it's an interesting one, and it's the key to the whole puzzle, really, in terms of unraveling habits and purifying karma. And there's an easy way of understanding it, and then there's the complexity of actually living that understanding and meditating on that understanding and getting more nuance and subtlety. But I think even just being curious about conceptions really starts to help. So I'm glad that you brought up that word. Yeah, and karma as well. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, T, go ahead.
My thought started to leave. Wait, it's coming back. Uh, correct viewpoint, from my understanding, is the practice of stepping out of the mind, the busy mind, the emotions, and the body, and being able to have an accurate perception from that place. Then I can have the right thoughts about something, the right speech,
Mhm.
and take and have the right behavior or actions in life. And over time, that becomes my lifestyle and my habits, my way of being. But everything starts with a correct viewpoint. If I do not have the correct viewpoint, then I'm going to have wrong speech, wrong action, and it will not help my karma either.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, correct view is it's an interesting kind of puzzle or conundrum. And really, simply put, the correct view is the view of wisdom. But what kind of wisdom? The wisdom about what? Okay, wisdom about reality. But what reality? Whose reality? These are the kind of words that come up in this topic, but we know that to cut samsara, to end uncontrolled reincarnation, we need the correct view very precisely. So it becomes a really important project. And the correct view gets described in a few different ways, depending on your tradition, depending on your philosophical tenet school. When I explain it in this course, I'm going to be explaining it from the perspective of the middle way consequence school view, the prasangika view. And that view says in brief that everything, people, places, phenomena of all types, situations, everything, absolutely everything, is empty of inherent existence because it dependently arises. So you hear this word emptiness, and your mind immediately kind of goes to blank, to nothingness, to a void, and that is not what's being described. But there is a characteristic of it which is spacious. So if you can think of possibility or potential that has not yet been actualized, there's a spaciousness to that, but it doesn't have that like void characteristic, like black hole. Yeah. And really what we're talking about is a characteristic that every phenomena has. So you have to have a phenomena to be able to attribute a characteristic to it. So the ultimate truth of anything is its lack of inherent existence, its emptiness of inherent existence. So we're talking about a characteristic of inherence or independence or intrinsicness that nothing has, but seems to. And that's the issue, is that it seems to. Everything seems to exist just as it appears. And so the very simple example for this is Lama Zopa Rinpoche would often use is the letter A. So the letter A, before you knew how to read, was just lines, wasn't it? It was just a line that went up and a line that went down and a line that was across. And then when you were a little child, someone said to you, that's the letter A. And you were like, is it? Whatever, I don't care. And then they'd say, A is for apple. A is for this. A is for that. It sounds like this. And you got taught that those lines meant that letter, meant those sounds were used in that way. And because it's been repeated so often, now it looks like the A jumps off the page at you. It looks like A is telling you that it's an A, that those lines are telling you themselves that they're A. When you know in reality, you placed A there where those lines are, that direction, but it feels like the other direction. So that's the appearance of everything. Things appear to be telling you what they are, and we don't recognize that we're projecting a reality on them. But there is something, yes, very, 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 very subtle from a distance, yes, but it's not exactly as it seems. So who cares about the letter A? What about good people or bad people? Good news or bad news? Yeah, that seems to exist the way it appears also. Yeah, it seems to be concrete, seems to be independent and obvious. To undermine those assumptions that are too concrete, we're not talking over the top of our common sense. We're not negating what we've learned as adult people who have lived a life. What we're bringing to it is a new level of understanding together with it. And so we look at, say, something very simple, like a difficult person in your life who now you like, but initially you did not. Someone that your first impression wasn't great. And you came to find some new information about them, some history about them, some points of connection, maybe some points that helped explain their behavior to you. And now when you see them, you like them and you're happy to see them. But initially you weren't. They haven't changed a great deal, but because of your background understanding, their appearance is different. Yeah, and it's not like just a visual thing. There's a whole kind of energetic component to this. You know, when you don't like someone, you don't really like the look of them, even if they're conventionally attractive, you don't really want to see them. Yeah, and when you really, really love someone, even if they're a very ordinary looking person with no particularly beautiful characteristics, you love the look of them. They're beautiful to you. Yeah. So much about life is believing our projections, and our projections all are tainted by ignorance. It doesn't mean they're completely wrong, but they're wrong in a very specific way, which perpetuates uncontrolled cyclic existence and all of our negative habits and the causes for suffering. Yeah. So the correct view becomes a very important project. So these three, yeah, renunciation, bodhicitta, correct view, this is your way out of suffering. This is your way out of harming others. And this is the way of fundamentally being helpful in society, not just being a good citizen, but actually helping to bring people out of samsara with you by offering the same tools you use to get yourself out. So that's just kind of a rough summary of these three. Do you have thoughts so far that you want to bring up, or any questions so far? I know it's a lot to take in right off the bat, but I just wanted to make sure we at least got a little taste of each of the three before we do our deep dive. Any immediate thoughts or questions?
I have a question with regards to renunciation. I feel confident that I can find many, many things written about bodhicitta and about emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
I find I struggle to read much about renunciation, which I feel I get the general drift on, but I'd like deeper understanding. So can you give any guidance there? And then the other question I've got is, can you also guide us to a copy of the prayer you did, the three principal aspects of the path? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. The prayer that I use, that particular version, you can find at Lotsawa House for a free download off Lotsawa House, and you just type in three principal aspects of the path, and all done, sorted. You can also find it on the FPMT website in the foundation shop, and yep, easy peasy. So the three principal aspects of the path by Lama Tsongkhapa. It's been translated a few different times in English. I'll probably use different translations just to kind of give a different sense of each of the main bits. And it looks like the link's already in the chat for those of you that want to download it right away. So thank you for that. You're quite right that renunciation doesn't get the same airtime as bodhicitta and correct view. So many beautiful books on bodhicitta, so many beautiful books on the correct view. Renunciation is like not so stylish, right? Like it's a little bit confronting. Yeah. And so the way in which I engage with renunciation has been mainly through my favorite prayers on renunciation, none of which are particularly easy on the ego. Yeah. The first one is called Heart Spoon, and it's by Pabonka Rinpoche. And Heart Spoon is this prayer that basically goes on and on and on and on about all the ways that we waste time. And it was written by, Pabonka Rinpoche, like, I don't know, 100 years ago. He was a relatively contemporary scholar. He was where we found liberation in the palm of our hands. But, he's long since passed away, but in the great scheme of Buddhism, not that long. So Pabonka Rinpoche wrote Heart Spoon. And he's talking about how we've made our life busy, and then we become attached to the busyness, and then we make our busyness our whole life, and then suddenly we're on our deathbed and wonder, what was it all for? That's the summary of that particular prayer. It's hardcore. We might read it next week. Another one is the Innermost Jewels of the Kadampas, and this is talking about some really pith instructions for becoming disillusioned in a healthy way about the immediate like errands of this life, the obsessions of this life. And it can be quite a useful one as well. So renunciation I often access via the outlines in the Lamrim Chenmo or through poetic verses, because it is harder to find good readings in English on it, for sure. One Lama who does talk about renunciation a lot was our late teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. He had a lot to say about renunciation, some of which is quite hardcore. But, a lot of it boils down to thinking about what your priorities are and why you don't live by them, right? Like if we knew we were dying tonight, what would we be annoyed that we did today? What would we feel was a waste of time? Yeah, what argument, what article did you read? What nonsense conversation did you have? What worries did you hang on to that just would dissolve if you knew this was your last night on earth? Yeah. So it's not about not caring about things. It's about remembering on purpose those deep core values you've always had. And what is renunciation fundamentally? It is the highest form of self-care. Renunciation is the highest form of self-care. We talk about self-care and like burnout prevention all the time in the world, and it sounds like rest. And indeed, we do need to rest more, and we don't need to be so busy. And that is not renunciation, and it's actually not solving the fundamental issue. The kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop creating more causes of suffering. Yeah, real self-care. How do you stop hurting yourself? Yeah, stop creating the causes for suffering. So, a self-care retreat might be a Vajrasattva retreat, right? Well, you purify past negative karma and really look at the patterns that lead you to perpetuate it. So that's a bit confronting, right? This is not a non-Buddhist conversation because a lot of context is involved in saying renunciation is self-care. But if you sit with it a little bit, I think that you might come to the same conclusion. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a couple just kind of more technical snippets to get a sense of this word, renunciation. As I said before, it's also translated as the determination to be free. And I think that if you just sit with what would a determination to be free be, yeah, that real, like, I want to get out of here, it involves renunciation of suffering and its causes. So if you were in a prison and there were a lot of other people in prison with you, your main priority is probably not going to be buying throw cushions and pretty blankets and having hors d'oeuvres for the prison cell, right? But that's kind of how we live in samsara, is we don't think of how do I get myself out? How do I help get others out? We think, how can I make myself comfortable in my prison cell? Which is understandable if we didn't know there was a way out. But there is a way out. And so all that time, energy, money, attention spent on trying to buffer some concrete box and make it a little bit more cozy could be spent in digging and digging and digging. Now, what's more fun, shopping or digging, right? Shopping's way more fun than digging, but digging has an end, shopping doesn't. Are you with me on my analogy? Right? Yeah, okay. So we're not to be blamed that our strategies thus far have been, how do I get comfortable in a difficult life, in a difficult world, in a difficult time in history? How do I get comfortable and just kind of try and make it not quite so bad? We're not to be blamed for that being our strategy because we haven't really learned other ways. Yeah, I mean, even the cat, she's like, how can I get comfortable? Maybe I'll try this shoulder. Maybe I'll try that shoulder. I don't know. Maybe I'll show my bum to a whole bunch of people online. Not an effective strategy, but it's all she knows. Right? We can actually study. We can actually study. So if we're just sort of thinking, what are the ways I can consciously evolve? How can I self-direct my own evolution? Because otherwise, I really am not that much different than an animal. I just have more intelligence and more strategies to get comfortable. But if I'm honest, I'm actually less successful at getting comfortable and relaxed than my cat, right? She's way more successful in getting comfortable and relaxed. Yeah. So let's not be an animal, you know? Again, we've been an animal countless times. Let's be something else. Yeah, let's at least be human again if we can't get out of the wheel. So renunciation, it's going to require a little bit of internal investigation in the ways in which we are attached and stuck to causes of suffering and not even realizing that those are causes of suffering. So to get this real renunciation, it's fueled by contemplations of suffering and its causes. And the way you can do that is, as I mentioned, looking at the first two noble truths, looking at the 12 links of dependent arising, that wheel of life image that a lot of you know, looking at the faults of attachment, and like the 8 worldly concerns. And so there's a lot of different strategies for developing renunciation, but basically you're trying to get disillusioned with a lot of your own habit patterns. And you really need renunciation in order to have a fundamental shift to get onto the path to enlightenment. So this is a big old chart and I'll come back to it. But right here at the path of accumulation, you really begin practice as a Buddhist when you have renunciation. Right now, we're like working up to it. Yeah, we're like pre-path, but we haven't had this fundamental shift where all day, every day, in an uncontrived, spontaneous way, we want to get out of cyclic existence. Yeah. And for a Mahayanist, we want to combine that with bodhichitta, the mind of enlightenment. Okay. So today is just our summary day, so don't worry if you're not tracking everything yet. Don't worry, we'll circle back. But the next one, bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, this is the main Mahayana motivation. It's called the mind with 2 aspirations. The aspirations are to become a Buddha, to benefit sentient beings. Yeah, or just briefly to become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And this is relative bodhicitta, and it's subdivided into aspiring and engaging. Yeah, the wish to go and actually going, the way Shantideva describes it. And aspiring bodhicitta is what you generate initially. And engaging bodhicitta is firmly rooted through the taking of bodhisattva vows. So right now we have aspiring bodhicitta, possibly engaging bodhicitta, probably not totally uncontrived at our level. Who can say? We don't know who's in the room. But right now, what we've got is a thought, right? We've got a thought that wishes to develop and acknowledges that development benefits everyone around you. Yeah, this is a thought that has occurred to us in some way, maybe not in those words, but that if I work on my own mind, that has a direct benefit on the people in my life. Have we had some sort of thought like this in our life? Yes? Yeah, or not just now suddenly, but anyway, right? But, the idea that self-development, that self-directed evolution, that training the mind is not just a fun project for yourself, but that it has an actual ripple effect. This is something that maybe we don't recognize as often as we could. We don't really realize how powerful we are. But we all know what it's like if someone in the house is in a terrible mood, right? If someone in the house is in a terrible mood, they don't have to say anything. You feel it, right? Like a heavy, heavy, dark cloud in the room. Yeah. We've all been in that. Yeah. So the opposite is also true. If someone is in a fundamentally peaceful, stable, loving mental atmosphere, the whole energy in the room shifts. Yeah, everything is a little bit better because of that. And that's just with having a general good mood. Say you're feeling kind of ho-hum, but someone else in your household is chipper. Sometimes that like brings you along with them. Now, if you're really, really grumpy and depressed, it might annoy you, right? But, if you're just kind of neutral, someone else's mood being up can kind of help you level up. Yeah. So this is just kind of a basic thing that we know. Bodhicitta is like a million times more. So does anyone have an experience of having met uh, an amazing person that just their presence, you were happier before they even said anything? Maybe it was His Holiness the Dalai Lama, maybe it was Lama Zopa Rinpoche, but it might have also been like your grandma, right? It might have also been like the nice cashier down the road, where just the sight of them, whatever they were bringing to that encounter, really helped you become at ease. There was like a palpable quality. Yeah, someone in this life that you've met that really struck you. I remember my mom saying this about some political figure that she met, 40 years ago. She, shook some politician's hand, and he was like a really nice politician, and it just completely made her heart open. Imagine, right? Um, we've all had some sort of experience where someone else's presence brought out the best in us, probably. Yeah. So what if we're that for each other? What if we're that for other people? What are the ingredients of that? And bodhicitta can sound like this kind of technical thing, this mind of enlightenment. But if you remember in Buddhism, heart and mind are the same word. Not the physical heart, right? But heart center. Heart and mind, sem, yeah, same word. And so we could say the heart of enlightenment. Some translators have even said the spirit of enlightenment, but that sounds kind of hokey. I don't know. It feels too wishy-washy to me, but you might like it. Spirit of enlightenment. Sounds like an airline, but anyway, heart of enlightenment or mind of enlightenment. This is really interesting because what they're saying is you start with a thought, may I become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And then you think it again, and you think it again, and you think it again with more reasons, more angles, more logic, more experience, more examples. And eventually that thought turns into what is called a main mind. And when a thought or a mental factor becomes a main mind, then it conditions every other thought that you have. So you might be used to the meditation of trying to focus on the sky, not the clouds, the clarity of mind meditation. And the clouds are like your thoughts coming and going, sometimes fun weather, sometimes horrible weather, but they're just clouds, yes. And then the sky is always clear, even if the weather is horrible, the classic, yeah, sky, not the clouds. Okay, so imagine that the weather gets used to being a certain kind of weather such that it imbues the blue sky with a color that can't change. Or maybe water is a better analogy. I don't know. But what the premise is that really practice does make perfect, but not just in terms of a basic habit. It's a fundamental shift in how you view everything. So the same principles apply in anything you've ever learned, which is it takes a lot of effort to become effortless. Yeah. Like if you've played a sport or you've played a musical instrument or you've learned some specific type of art form, in the beginning when you're learning the fundamentals, there's a lot of just nuts and bolts, right? Like when I was a kid, I played basketball, right? And we had different drills and we had different plays and different ways that we were going to be on the court when we met our opponents. And we drilled them and drilled them and drilled them and drilled them. And then when the game comes, you don't think about it, right? Your teammate just makes a little 2 or a little 3 or something, and you know which play you're going to do, and you all synchronize. Yeah, have you had some experience like that in sports or in music and you've all played together and practiced together so much and then it comes to the concert and you barely need to look at the music because you're all just kind of in that flow state. It takes a lot of effort to become effortless, right? So you practice and you practice and you practice until you don't need to think about it anymore. That's what we're doing with bodhicitta, is we're drilling it. But we're drilling it because we already agree and we already love it. So if we don't agree that bodhicitta is how we want to think, then there's no sense forcing it, right? We need to go back a few steps and ask ourselves, is that the way I want to think? So that's our place of kind of discussion right now is having the aspiration to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings a good primary thought to have? We don't want to assume that it is, right? We don't want to just take it for granted that it is. We're Mahayanists, we're like, yeah, of course, of course. But like, give it a minute and really ask, like, what's the disadvantage? Like, could you set yourself up for some kind of perfectionist thinking? Or would you get complacent about daily life things or immediate injustices in the face of this giant long-term goal? You know, are there misunderstandings that we could bring to such an aspiration? So rather than feeling, okay, let's repeat bodhicitta until it becomes a main mind, let's go back a few steps and just ask ourselves, is this how we want to think? Like, do we have questions or are we missing connections? Yeah, can you like conjure up some doubts? You might have thought bodhicitta was a great idea for many decades, but like let yourself play with it a little bit and ask, is it a good idea? Right? Having a giant goal, is it a good idea? Why might it not be? Yeah, play devil's advocate for your own self. Yeah, can you think of any misunderstandings of bodhicitta? Maybe things you've heard people say at Dharma centers that might lead them to a not helpful way of thinking about it? Yeah, please, Thomas.
I'm trying to unmute. Um, what comes to mind is to be so busy pursuing this bodhicitta that when someone who is suffering is in front of you, you're like, get out of my way. I'm busy being compassionate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You start to forget the point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The goal can be too big or too abstract, and then you miss the real-time suffering in front of you. The opposite can also happen, that you become obsessed with the real-time suffering in front of you and forget the big picture. It can go either way, you know. It's really easy for us to get stuck in big picture or stuck in immediate. Do you know what I mean? You
So
know,
how do you
we
find the right balance?
exactly, exactly. And you know, for me, really thinking about the things that fuel bodhicitta are the things we already know and love, like loving kindness and compassion. Compassion has that dual focus of acknowledging and believing in the potential of someone to be free from suffering and seeing their suffering play out in real time, right? Compassion is the wish for sentient beings to be free from suffering. So you wish them freedom. That means you believe freedom is possible. Yeah. Also, you see the suffering, but it's not just seeing the suffering. Otherwise, that's just kind of raw empathy, which eventually burns you out. And so it really feels like a heartbeat or a breath where it contracts and expands and contracts and expands in a way that's really healthy and functional. And that when we get overwhelmed, we got stuck in too big or too small. So if you can somehow think, how can I look at suffering and look at the potential for freedom, and look at suffering and look at the potential for freedom, and really be able to keep those two simultaneously. And then when what's ever happening in front of me, I'm just really conscious of the other. So if I'm looking at suffering, I'm aware that there's freedom. And if I'm looking at the path to freedom, I'm also not forgetting there is suffering right now. Do you know what I mean? So you just, you take turns like spotlighting whatever's relevant in your life, but you're not forgetting the other side of it. And this kind of flexibility of mind is really going to prevent burnout. And it's also going to help you not spiritual bypass, which is to jump over what you're actually feeling and experiencing and go straight to the Dharma lesson you think you should have already learned. Right? So like someone annoys you, you're pretending not to be annoyed and you go straight to, oh, but I have patience because patience is good. That would be spiritual bypassing. You have to first say, oh, I am annoyed, actually. Yeah, I'm annoyed. So how do I get to patience authentically? Because I know that's where I want to go, but you're not pretending to already be there. Yeah. So this kind of combination of just a genuine acceptance and acknowledgement of where you actually are in tandem with an absolute belief in your own potential to develop and everyone else's. Yeah. So it takes just a little bit of like oiling the gears, right? Or just kind of like getting it fluid and flexible. But when you think, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings? May I become enlightened in order to benefit all sentient beings? What you're really saying is, how can I be the best possible condition to bring out the best in others? How can I be the best possible condition to offer tools, strategies, teachings to those who want to hear them? Yeah. How can I notice the opening in someone else's mind when they're ready to hear something new or something deeper? Because right now it's just a shot in the dark. We're just guessing. This maybe is helpful. I don't know. It's worked in the past. This maybe is comforting. I don't know. Here's something. But we don't know. Sometimes we're accurate, and that's great. But a lot of what we do in the world is samsara symptoms relief. We're just putting a band-aid on it. And it is kind and good that we do so. And also, it's not getting rid of the fundamental issue. Yeah, the fundamental issue of all of our ignorance. So some days you don't have the bandwidth to do the big, deep work. And it is still very satisfying and effective to just comfort someone today who is crying today. Yeah, do that. But if you then think that's all I will ever do, it can create a kind of stagnation or a kind of sadness or a sense of like, when will it ever end? Because the suffering of humanity is so vast, and then the suffering of other species is so vast, and then et cetera, you get overwhelmed. So something about acknowledging when you get the overwhelm or when you get the stuck, shift perspective. Yeah, did I go too wide too long? Or did I get too short-sighted too long? Does it make sense what I'm saying? So bodhicitta really requires a lot of flexibility because you're keeping this big goal, but then you're really acknowledging your life as it plays out and thinking, how can I use this life as my path? Nothing in my life is blocking my path. Everything in my life is my path if I choose to see it that way. Yeah, and then it's a matter of just pacing. Yeah, pacing. Yeah, other sort of quandaries about bodhicitta. Yes, Cynthia, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a basic question. So when we do Tonglen, which is really a mental exercise, in a way of how we might be trying to help others, is that considered an actual practice in aspiring bodhicitta, or is it just us trying to get to that point? If that makes sense.
Yeah. The practice of Tonglen, the practice of giving and taking, it's definitely a method to develop bodhicitta, 100%. Which kind of bodhicitta, aspiring, engaging, relative, or ultimate, that's going to depend on where you're at as an individual. Yeah. So for some people, it might just be kind of a really helpful mental exercise to make all of the difficulty in life feel voluntary and feel like fuel. For some people, it is a really active way of getting rid of negative self-cherishing, self-centered selfishness. For yet other people, it might be a direct gateway to the bodhicitta they have in such a way that they're immediately engaged with their bodhicitta, and it really affects those around them very strongly. So it really depends on the practitioner, but it's useful every step, every level. Tonglen is a useful strategy. So we'll do some Tonglen in this course for sure. Yeah, it's really good, really helpful one. So when we're looking at renunciation and bodhicitta, and we haven't gotten to correct view yet, we have to start by asking, why is it useful? And what are the disadvantages of not having it? Just really simple, like pros and cons, right? And then we want to ask, what has blocked me from it if I've already gotten myself convinced? If we make it simpler, something like compassion, we already think it's a good idea. We already think love is a good idea. No one needs to convince you that love's a good idea. And yet, are you as loving as you want to be, as consistently as you want to be, with as many people as you want to be? Sometimes our best friend or the spouse or whoever, like the closest person in your life, your heart's not open to. Never mind strangers and enemies. It's hard to just have natural open-heartedness all the time for people that you already decided you love. Do you agree? It doesn't come as often as you wish it did, even for those you're already like, yeah, you're one of mine. Yeah, let alone strangers and let alone enemies. So the question becomes, what stands in opposition to things we're already convinced of? And this is where we get into conversations about karma. And we get into conversations not just about karma, but the role of ignorance and suffering in creating that karma. And the way in which not having renunciation is part of why we objectify people and turn them into a substance that's supposed to give us something. So love is wishing others to have happiness. Attachment is wishing others to have happiness so that they give us happiness, right? So love is just wishing them to have happiness. Yeah? Attachment's like, so that you give me happiness as a business deal. So they both want happiness for the other, but we go back and forth with our loving relationships and we fall into the trap of, well, I was nice to you, so you should be nice to me. That's the deal, right? Yeah. And there's something logical about that. We're not just throwing that away. Relationships involve a certain amount of agreements and a certain amount of give and take. So how do we really acknowledge, when is it problematic attachment? And when is it something to be negotiated about in just kind of a real world relationship, friendship, etc.? So what you really want to sit with is, what blocks bodhicitta is self-cherishing. What is self-cherishing? Because that is why we hurt others. And if we didn't have self-cherishing, we wouldn't have this us and them objectifying tendency, this dualism that really gets reinforced. Self-cherishing wouldn't have a leg to stand on if we didn't also have self-grasping. Yeah. So these twin demons are the object of battle on the spiritual path, but they also can be objects of great amusement, right? If we want to laugh at ourselves and see the absurdity of humanity. So self-cherishing, let's start with that one. The antidote to self-cherishing is bodhichitta, but what is self-cherishing? And so think about when you've become very self-centered and you've become very, very aware of your needs and how they're not getting met in a hyper-aroused way, not in a practical way. Practical's fine. You need to be fed and watered. You deserve to be treated with respect. That's all fine. When does it flip into something that's actually afflicted? Can you feel a change in your body when self-cherishing is really driving? Can you feel a tension increase? Is there a different characteristic to your thoughts? It's really important to be able to identify it when it's really up, because then you'll start to see the way in which it lies to you. Yeah, it says you need this and this and this, and then you can be happy. And other people should make that happen. If they don't, they're bad. It becomes this sort of like spoiled adolescent, full of entitlement. Yeah, we all have this like tiny teenager inside of us that's like, what about me? Right? And self-cherishing has a characteristic of also being very self-conscious, easily embarrassed, easily defensive. Do you know yourself in two different modes when you're just sort of like contentedly confident, able to laugh at yourself, going with the flow? And then there's like a switch that flips and you get tight and defensive. And if someone teases you, you are just annoyed. Yeah. And it is not funny. Do you know that switch in yourself? Like there's like a tension that happens. A guard goes up. And that feeling of guard going up, that's an interesting place to examine because it really feels like protection. And the thing it's doing is blocking you from connection with others. The very thing that you want, the very thing that will soothe you. Yeah, it does the opposite of what you need and says, I protect you. So self-cherishing is so problematic. And the reason we have it is because we have self-grasping ignorance. Yeah, so the self-grasping ignorance sees the me incorrectly. You exist, there's a self, no problem, don't worry about it, yeah? But the way we see the self is false. We see the self as inherently existent. We don't realize it, we may not have ever used those words, but the way that we feel in our body, the way we feel in our mind is really like, I am myself and have been always. And I add experiences to me and I learn things to me and I discard habits from me, but there's a core little hub that has always been me. That's the feeling of self-grasping. And if there's that core little hub that has always been me, even if I've added things and subtracted things, that little core obviously needs protection. The thing is, there has never been that hard little core. So what are you protecting? Yeah, it becomes like protecting one hand from the other. Yeah. There are two hands. They are not the same thing. But do you need to protect one hand from the other? No, that's silly. Yeah. Similarly, which is not to say there doesn't need to be protection strategies related to problematic people in life. So the delicate thing with Dharma is that it's very easy to think that you should talk over the top of your common sense. And that is never what's being said. It's taking your common sense and you're adding layers of depth and nuance to it. So you become less reactive and more just responsive. So as I'm talking, do you feel anything experientially that you can discern the difference between like a more wise, grounded side of yourself as opposed to the more actively self-cherishing, self-grasping side of yourself? It might just be how you think of yourself on a good day as opposed to a bad day. But it's helpful to try and tease out What are those two versions of me? Yeah, what are they like? Then, what's the one I believe and what's the one I don't believe? Because if you really clarify the afflicted side of yourself, then when it's driving, you know not to listen to its choices. You say, I'll circle back when I calm down. If it's still true when I calm down, then I'll do what you say. Yeah. But for now, I am not going to send that text message. No, I'm not. All right. Right now, I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut until I settle down. And if I still want to say it after I settle down, maybe I can. But, there's this agitation and there's this illusion of urgency when self-cherishing is really driving. It's quietly in the background all the time, but it really takes over occasionally and just like ruins the whole day. Yeah, do you know this one? It's a stinker, such a stinker. So if you can catch it, the side benefit is that also you start giving people a break because you start to see it in them. Yeah, and if you can see it in them while not identifying them with it, that is the key, right? So, take your closest friend, when they're in a mood, right? You know what they're like. There's no talking to them when they're in a mood. And you also know when they're in an open, happy state of mind. It's like all of us are like two people. Do you know what I mean? And so there's no talking to them when afflictions are up because their afflictions will just co-opt everything you say and distort it through its own filters and come back at you with why you're wrong or annoying or not good enough or whatever their story is. Yes? Right? Your closest friend? They've got their moods. Yes? And then when you see, like, their whole face can change sometimes when they come back to themselves, right? When they're their good heart again, when they're calm again. And you could say the same exact thing, and they might be able to actually take it in and respond wisely. So when you see your own self-cherishing, then you can start to pinpoint it in others in a way that you stop blaming them and punishing them and being frustrated. And you're much more like, oh, I know that place. You don't say that, it'll sound condescending, right? But in your mind, you go, yeah, I know that place. And when I'm in that place, I make no sense. When I'm in that place, there's no talking to me. I'm going to just shut up until I see them settle down, and then we'll circle back. Do you know what I mean? So again and again, we keep coming back to the practice of self-awareness, self-development, developing bodhichitta, all of these things that we're working on. They have a direct impact on your everyday life and your immediate relationships. You don't have to wait for enlightenment for them to be helpful. They'll be helpful all along the way. And one of the ways that they're helpful is the better you know yourself, the better you will understand other people. Yeah. And it's not like suddenly everyone's the same. Everyone's got their quirks and their history and their different ways of interpreting life. But you start to get the essence of, oh, that is what anger does. That is what attachment does. That is what jealousy does. I see that. Anger is the enemy. This person is not my enemy. Ignorance is the enemy. This person is not my enemy. Ignorance is the enemy for me and for them and for wherever I find it. The affliction of ignorance is the issue, not the human being who is manifesting it in front of me. So if you know your own and you know it is not you, you see it in others, you forgive them, you give them space, you're more strategic, you're less rattled. And other people's rudeness doesn't get to you. Other people's neglect doesn't get to you. Which doesn't mean you don't act. It means now you act from peace. Now you act from clarity. Now you act from your best wisdom. And all of your creativity and life experience is accessible to you when you're calm. When you're agitated, only your most surface responses, animal instincts, default setting. Sometimes is useful, but like your best goods aren't available to you when you're agitated. So we can start thinking in those terms of, if I want to be effective in this life, if I want to be effective in future lives, if I want to actually develop into enlightenment, I need to start with where I am today and really know myself well. And knowing myself well should carry with it a type of genuine affection and acceptance, which might sound a little cheesy, but is actually a very important psychology. Because if you accept yourself, this is who I am so far, these are my behaviors so far, I make perfect sense given my history. If you give that a few beats, everyone else makes sense given their history too. And you can accept them, which is not the same thing as being complacent or letting them off the hook for bad behavior or letting yourself off the hook for bad behavior. It's the fundamental foundation, is that you are worthy of love even if you never change, even if you get worse. And so are they. Yeah, because we're not being trained to love afflictions. We're being trained to love the good, kind heart everyone has, the Buddha nature that everyone has, that got layers of crap loaded on top of it from beginningless time until now, all fed by self-cherishing and self-grasping. So if we can start to kind of tease out the person from their behaviors, the person from their afflictions, the person from their self-cherishing and self-grasping in ourselves and in others, already you're ahead of the game and you're bringing more peace to this world. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, going on for the next week, is to really try and examine that back and forth feeling of what is it like for me? What does it look like in them? What does it look like for me? What is it like in them? Suffering. Just start with suffering. We can build up to looking at self-cherishing, self-grasping, etc. But let's just start by noticing what is the impact of suffering on myself and on others. Because just noticing it can soften you. Yeah, you wake up, you've got, I don't know, foggy head, bad tummy, a headache. You notice the emojis that randomly appear on Zoom. No, you notice that, you're a different person on the days that you wake up not well. Then you're looking at others and you're saying, God, they're in a bad mood. Why don't they get over themselves? Oh, right. Because suffering. They're awful because suffering. It's not like earth-shattering. You already knew this. But trying to notice it on purpose is a very useful exercise for building into real renunciation and real compassion. So just look for suffering and its impact without getting sucked into like a story of sadness or why society is broken or anything like that. Those are all very true, but that's not where we're going with this. Yes, where we're going with this is getting out of the prison cell. So first we have to really look at, how is this thing built? What's reinforced it? What's the structure of this cell we've gotten ourselves into? Yeah, so the really big piece is suffering. Does it make sense? Look for your own suffering and its impact. Look at the suffering of others and its impact, and just choose to notice it as you're walking around thought project for the week. Do you have any questions or comments so far? Yeah,
A
Eleanor,
lot to
please.
think about. You give us a lot to think about.
Some may see too much.
No,
Next,
a lot to think about.
so next week we're going to do renunciation deep dive and lots of meditations related to renunciation. And so it will really help if you do this project of just kind of noticing suffering and its impact on yourself and on others. It will really help. But if you totally forget, don't worry. Okay, so we'll do some meditation and we'll also do a class deep dive on renunciation next time. Yeah, Jennifer, did you have a question? Oh, mute.
Again, sorry. I was wondering, the meditation that we started with the visualizing the Buddha, and you said about imagining positive qualities that we're getting. Does that actually transform into us developing positive qualities, like almost like miraculously? Does that happen, or?
What it does is it creates a powerful condition to ripen the good seeds you've already created. So you've already developed seeds for wisdom and compassion and love in this life, in past lives, countless good things. They haven't sprouted. So if you really think of karma as like seeds and the conditions like water and sunshine and soil and things that make a seed sprout, you need powerful conditions. And a very powerful condition is a mantra and a meditation like this. It's like watering those seeds. So it's not giving you something you don't already have. It's waking up what is already there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, William, go ahead.
Yes, and the materials for the session, there were lots of readings. I was wondering if there were reading assignments there. There weren't last time I looked, but I don't know if there are now.
Up to you, up to you. What I'll send for this next session are the prayers that I mentioned, the heart spoon and the innermost jewels of the Kadampa Geshes, because they're going to really help us with our renunciation. But if readings are something that you feel like really support your practice, there's the required readings for people that are like aiming for their certificate in discovering Buddhism. But for those of you that aren't, the same readings can be quite useful. So I think Venerable Dundrup will be sending those out if he hasn't already. So they're optional, but quite helpful. Optional, but quite helpful. Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, any other miscellaneous before we call it a night? Any miscellaneous thoughts or questions or things that you really hope we cover in this particular series of classes? I can make sure it goes on the list if there's something you really hope we cover. Unless it's like outside of my skill set, in which case I'll just give you a book. Yeah, Laran.
Yeah, hi, Venerable. I had a time difficulty. It wasn't like at 7 for me. It was so I lost a lot of. Sorry, but I'm catching up. So, can I have everybody will have the list of some reading, I think. So I will read and I will try to understand better. But when we say we look at our suffering, and I try to do that, obviously, and when people are saying, "Oh, I have a bad knee today," I think of my thing, and sometimes I say, "Oh, you're lucky you have only one knee that is hurting you," and I go like, "Oh, I had this, oh, I had that." Oh, it's
Competitive
not
brain.
even my first language, English. Look at me. And I go up, and then I'm tired.
Yeah.
The point is lost. I don't know how
Yeah,
to
point is lost.
contract this.
Yeah, the point is not competitive suffering.
No.
Or necessarily even to commiserate together. The point is to notice how people's behavior changes when they're suffering, how your behavior changes when you're suffering, as a way of really increasing your compassion and increasing your renunciation. Because renunciation is about renouncing suffering and its causes. And so first you really need to look at how bad it is. And we'll look at the causes, of course, with karma and disturbing emotions. But first, just look at the state of things. So it's a really useful practice to like watch suffering play out without building a story, without, adding your own piece to it, to just notice, here's what suffering seems to be doing to me today. Just notice it without feeding it. And then when someone else is complaining or someone else is visibly in distress, just notice, wow, yeah, yesterday they were different. Today they are different. This is interesting. And you're kind of like a scientist of your own experience and a scientist of the experiences you observe in others. And it's just this raw data that's going to come in handy when we try to deepen our renunciation. It's to really notice what suffering does. Yeah, not letting people off the hook necessarily for bad behavior, but really noticing the reasons why. Very, very happy, very, very healthy people are generally more likely to be at their best. Yes? And when we feel rotten physically or mentally, we're more likely to hurt ourselves and others. So just kind of watching that play out, this is very useful exercise, and it's going to help with renunciation and compassion. So just kind of be curious. You don't have to come to any conclusions. It's just a noticing. This is what suffering seems to do for me, for others. Just notice. Yeah, and we'll circle back and kind of see what people's impressions have been. Yeah. Yeah, it's not rocket science, you've already noticed, but sometimes doing it on purpose really changes the impact. And it is interesting to see, when do you have natural compassion for others and their suffering, and when do you get triggered into resentment and think, oh, you
Yeah.
think what's suffering? You should hear about my life, and you get
Yeah,
into
for me personally, it's interesting because for me, when people are poor, old, and they are sick, oh, it comes so naturally that but when they are younger than me, they are richer than me, they in work, they are more like they I don't know, the salary, everything is better. I say, why you are complaining? And
Yeah.
then I lose my I don't
Yeah, it's
lose
human.
it,
Yeah,
but
we all do this. Yeah, we all do this. We have our like criteria of who's allowed to show their suffering or behave in a certain way because of it, or what's allowed to be considered suffering. We have all have our own criteria for that, and where the heart just opens and where the heart just shuts. And so the exercise is just be curious about that. You don't have to talk yourself out of anything in particular. Just watch it with a little bit more objectivity than usual. Be like, isn't it interesting? That one guy was so nice to, that other guy was just full of resentment. Why? Interesting. Yeah, just be a scientist of your own experience. Yeah, see what happens.
so much, and sorry, excuse me for being late. It was a mixing up for hours.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're all, yeah, in daylight savings and all that. So we'll just go ahead and dedicate. And I really appreciate all of your time and energy. And I'll see you same time next week. So all of the energy we put into these thoughts, let's direct it towards these aims. Jantu semcho rinpoche, ma ke panam ke gyuchi, ke panyam pa me pa yang, gone gondu pelwa sho, toni dawa rinpoche, ma ke panam ke gyuchi, ke panyam pa me pa yang, gone gondu pelwa sho. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Depending on
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.